Welcome to the BJJ Mental Coach podcast. I'm your host, Gustavo Dantas, and today we have Matthew Karakoulakis. Matthew is a seasoned lawyer, accredited mediator, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt with nearly 2 decades of experience in both the legal field and on the mats. Recognized as Australia's most influential lawyer, his expertise in law and martial arts has shaped his unique approach to negotiation, leadership, and personal development. As the host of Rolling Through Negotiations, he engages with First Nation leaders, martial artists, and professionals from various industries, delving into mindset, wellness, and effective negotiation techniques. So I had the opportunity to be a guest on his podcast a few weeks ago, and I decided, yeah, man, I think it would be great. I need to record another episode, so let's schedule it. It took some planning. Australia and Arizona here, about 16, 17 hours, I'm not sure. So that took some planning and fun interview. Topics that I love talking about: personal development, growth. That's the stuff that that we talked about here. Talk about negotiations. So fun episode. So one more update. As you can see, I haven't been releasing too many episodes, just time, and just don't have the time, and competing again, so that takes some time as well with preparation, train jiu-jitsu, strength conditioning, recovery, and all that I show on last year on this documentary slash vlog, The Diary of a Master, on YouTube, on the channel, the BJJ Mental Coach. So I show my journey getting back to competition after many years and coming back from injuries. So I show the routine, show some of the recovery and the matches, highlights, and so forth. So this year I decided to do a season 2. So I just released a new episode, and it was for my participation at the 2025 IBJJF European Championship. And same thing, recorded a few things from the trip and some of the highlights of the match. So if you want to take a look and check it out, YouTube, the BJJ Mental Coach. And also shout out, man, to New Hope Regeneration, because the stem cell treatment therapy that I did, it would not get me back on the competition mats, because 2023 I struggled the whole year with a neck issue, and getting to a point that teaching was very challenging. I wasn't training, and doctors talking about the possibility of surgery. And I said, man, and I was doing physical therapy, chiropractor, the whole thing. And it just wouldn't get better. And I finally decided, my brother Bruno Bastos told me, like, man, I had great experience with the therapy. I think you should try. And I did, and 2 months later, I started noticing difference on my neck. I was like, oh man, this is actually getting looser. And that's what got me back to competing. So 100%, of course, I have a team of like physical therapists and chiropractor, massage therapists, sure, but absolutely the stem cell was the game changer. And I decided to do another run a year later. It was December of 24. So it has been about 3 months. And because, man, it just goes to different parts of your body too. And I'm feeling my neck's been feeling really loose, which is incredible, because if you have neck issues, you know what I'm talking about, or back, it can be, man, frustrating to sleep. So I'm stoked that I'm healthy, get to compete in Orlando and in the Pans in a couple weeks, and excited for the season. And on the video, I explain a little bit about the program, the project that I created, How High Can You Fly, which is a question for you to reflect on, and about challenging yourself, getting some type of goal that you really stretching yourself, and that's the idea. So the BJJ Mental Coach YouTube channel, go there to check it out, and I hope you enjoy the interview.
Yeah.
Matthew, welcome to the podcast.
It's fantastic to be here, Gustavo. We caught up a couple of weeks ago for the soon-to-be released episode with you on Rolling Through Negotiations podcast. And so to have the chance to sit down with you again for your amazing podcast, BJJ Mental Coach. It's a great pleasure to be here and connecting with you and your listeners.
Yeah, we had a great conversation. Took some planning because Matt is in Australia. It's about 18 hours ahead. It's wild. And so it definitely requires some planning. And yeah, we're gonna hear a little bit more about the podcast, about your story. And to start with, man, just let us know, how did martial arts get into your life? Did you train any other martial arts before jiu-jitsu?
And before I just jump into that one, Gustavo, I just want to also just acknowledge the country that we're on here, which is Ghana country, where we're recording from. And I just want to acknowledge all First Nations peoples here in Australia, Brazil, where you're from, over there in the United States, and yeah, acknowledge elders past, present, and emerging. In relation to your question, my friend, about martial arts, I did. I started as a young kid. I think, like many people, after watching the famous Karate Kid movie, I thought, wow, karate's amazing. And I actually have an uncle and a cousin who were very, very into karate, and they steered me in that direction. So as a young kid, I did try um, karate, I tried kung fu, and I've done other martial arts as well on the MMA journey a little bit. But BJJ, I think, is a really beautiful art that is the one that has stuck with me the most in my heart and life. I think that BJJ is amazing because it brings people together. It also enables us to develop ourselves, right? And that enables us to learn and become the best version of ourselves. There's so many things that we can learn from jiu-jitsu that apply off the mat in other areas of life as well. And to be honest, the main reason why I actually train jiu-jitsu these days, I honestly say the number one reason is mental health.
Hmm.
And it's so interesting because when I speak with other people at the gym and just speak with other people about their number one purpose for training, I honestly feel that when people are being completely clear and understanding themselves, mental health seems to be the most common reason when I hear why people train BJJ, which I think is incredible because when you look at jiu-jitsu and you look at the reasons why people even start jiu-jitsu, or even when you explain to other people that you have this deep passion for jiu-jitsu, I don't think mental health is the most obvious answer. But the deep impact that we get from jiu-jitsu and the way that it shapes our life is something so special.
Yeah, I personally, I hear about this all the time, especially I'm greeting beginners, and I rarely get someone saying, "Yeah, I want for my mental health." Everyone's going to give, even if they're
Mm.
not give me the full reason behind. I want to get a better shape, learn how to defend myself. I want to learn a skill, da 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 da. The things that you always hear, and eventually people realize that what keep them at the school is the mental health and the community aspect as well. And but
Absolutely.
the mental health, it's absolutely a big one because I I relate with a lot of students, and I always give like a lot of credit when someone comes to do a first class. I tell them, like, number one, congratulations for being here, for taking the first step, because thousands and thousands of people just get overwhelmed with anxiety and choose not to leave the house to even try a class because it feels intimidating, or give them some anxiety for, just feels overwhelming. So I can tell sometimes someone is there. Some people can maybe have a little poker face, but a lot of people are just like feeling super anxious. "Oh, boy, what is going to happen? Are they going to beat me up? Are they going to be nice?" So when people are nice and they introduce themselves, and they start to little by little feel more comfortable. And do you feel like not right away, because it's tough to say, like, from practicing different arts to jujitsu, when did you start noticing that part of, like, how good, mentally this was doing for you?
It's a really good question because in part, I also think of, have I fully realized, even though I say hand on heart, the number one reason that I train BJJ is for mental health, have I actually fully realized, and do we actually fully know the depth in which BJJ helps us mentally?
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps we don't. Perhaps we realize the tip of the iceberg in terms of all those great mental health benefits. But what about that true depth? And if we see that our body and our mind and our spirit is all connected as one, how deep does that profound healing that takes place on those jiu-jitsu mats really help us in all of our life? I think that when I first began experiencing the way that jiu-jitsu helps with that mental health would be right after stepping on the jiu-jitsu mats in the very first class. Because as Stephen Covey speaks about the different stages of learning, and there's that first stage where you don't know what you don't know,
Mm-hmm.
right? You don't know anything about jiu-jitsu at all before you first step on the mat. But then you go through the different stages of learning, and when you step on the mat, it might be as simple as feeling good or just liking the vibe that you get there. But perhaps that positive feeling in itself is that first experience of mental health benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And so perhaps even without us knowing, the reason why we go back to jiu-jitsu for our second class, for our third class, and continuously from there, perhaps it is that mental health journey, even though we aren't conscious of that at the time.
And an interesting thing with me that, yeah, I've been doing this for 35 years, but thinking about the mental health or the personal development aspect of it, dude, when I was in my 20s, I'd be like, we're talking about personal development. I ain't got time for that. I got to win medals, you know? So I'm just focused on outcome,
Mm,
competing, kicking ass. I wouldn't even I had no idea how good that was doing for me and in my life, or as a teenager, values that was still in me, that it was just organically. And I'm just thinking, I'm going through my personal development journey without even realizing the impact that is teaching me my emotional resilience of like losing one tournament, two, three, four, five, and not giving up and having that, helping to build that emotional resilience. Or even if you're not competing, going to the school and then you're like, dude, I got my ass kicked today. I'll be back tomorrow. And then go back tomorrow and they're like, still getting my
mm,
ass kicked. So really helping to build that emotional resilience, because it's so easy to just go like, oh, I'm done. Don't want to do it anymore. I'm busy, got a bunch of stuff going on. Nah, don't want to do it. So I feel that the first 6 months of jujitsu is really make it or break it for a lot of people. Or if they're like, dude, I'm not getting better, I don't
and
get it, and then they, you know, walk away.
100%, Gustavo. And I feel that I read an article a few years ago, was published in one of the leading journals here in Australia. And it was all about how practicing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu makes me a better lawyer because I have my own um, law business here in Australia, and I'm continuously reflecting on principles of Jiu-Jitsu
Mm-hmm.
to help me be a better lawyer, to serve my clients better. And that's a really interesting thing because when I first started my business, I had this old vision of my dad in my head because my dad is from a migrant background and pretty strict Greek, European Greek father, who used to say to me all the time, Matthew, law is your thing. You shouldn't be doing jiu-jitsu, wasting your time on the jiu-jitsu mats. What, with a bunch of fighters? You need to be focusing on law. And there's many stories about Brazilian people. For example, I've heard many stories from Brazil, amazing Brazilian athletes coming from families where those athletes might have gone on to win world championships, but jiu-jitsu wasn't seen years ago as a place for having a future. There wasn't the opportunity of even doing what you're doing now,
Absolutely.
Gustavo, having this presence online, being able to educate people, share the awareness, share your learnings. There was nothing like this. And then as I was, little bit younger and starting out in my legal career and starting my own business and hearing my father say, you shouldn't be wasting your time doing jiu-jitsu. And because I saw him as such a role model of high work ethic, right? Because he would always work hard. And I think that you have to work hard if you want to be successful in something. And so I thought, oh, gee, maybe he's right. Maybe I shouldn't be doing jiu-jitsu if I really want to be serious into, my legal career. And so when I started my business, I took a few years off of jiu-jitsu and I started getting incredibly painful anxiety. And through the beautiful guidance of my wife, I found an amazing psychologist who specialized in anxiety, who helped me and gave me some amazing strategies to be dealing with it. But the first part of the strategy she gave was make sure you're getting back up into jiu-jitsu. And what's amazing is the limitation that I placed on myself in terms of, oh, I can't be an amazing lawyer and as well as spending time on the jiu-jitsu mats. What I was able to do is realize through the journey that, you know what, training jiu-jitsu as much as I can, I aim to be training 6 days a week. Having this level of commitment actually helps me serve my clients better. Actually means that when I am doing my work, I have much clearer focus. I have a healthy body, healthy mind. I can serve better. I can work harder. I have these levels of resilience that otherwise wouldn't be able to have. Being able to be more conscious under pressure. And these skills absolutely bring better outcomes for my clients. And so what I learned through that journey is by training jiu-jitsu, it makes us all better in what it is that we do with the rest of our lives. And so I believe that the impact that jiu-jitsu brings us is incredibly powerful.
And most likely that break end up working out well for you to kind of like realize the impact that you had before, and maybe you took for granted the impact that jiu-jitsu had, or maybe you took that break and be like, oh wow, this is more important than I even imagined. Do you feel that that was a kind
Yes,
of like a moment of shift, your mindset regarding jiu-jitsu?
absolutely. And the other amazing shift has been, see, as lawyers are typically counting, and there's a lot of jokes about lawyers counting in 6 minute units and counting time and all this sort of stuff, which is just sort of in a lot of ways comes, I think,
Hmm.
with success in all careers. We have to be conscious of time. It's a very finite resource and we have to use it wisely, right? And so even sometimes there's a feeling of, oh man, I'm so busy. How am I going to spend this couple of hours, 2, 3 hours after you travel and shower and spend your time on the jiu-jitsu mats? How are you going to spend this time when you are already smashed with a really busy day? But something that's really amazing that I think that some busy people don't appreciate is the way that jiu-jitsu gives back time. Because if you're facing a problem without that clarity of mind, without the clarity of thinking, man, it's going to take you longer to find the answer to that problem as opposed to if you had that clarity. And how many times do you step on the jiu-jitsu mat with a problem and you step off with the answer? And so that is part of the gift of jiu-jitsu giving you back time because it enables you to answer questions more efficiently. It enables you to operate more effectively. And so I believe that if you wait up a day where you're able to do jiu-jitsu, let's say 2 or 3 days, right? If you're weighing up a few days in a row where you did jiu-jitsu each day and you worked hard on whatever else you were doing, and you compare that to those days, say 2 or 3 days where you didn't do jiu-jitsu, I believe that the time and days in which you did jiu-jitsu, your output would actually be a lot greater. What do you
Yeah.
think about that, Gustavo?
Oh man, absolutely. And because I mean, we can go on and on with the kind of benefits and situations again that when I was younger, I had no idea, but things that we do, especially business related, I feel that a big one is the problem solving mindset.
Mm,
It's kind of like It's not like, oh my God, I'm here. It's like it is what it is. Someone in a mount. It would be. I would rather if someone was not in a mount or would be on my back, but they are here, and I need to stay calm. I cannot panic. I need to find a way to get out of this and hopefully reverse the situation.
Mm,
So having that calm or that consistent pursuit of problem solving, and helping to like in moments. And I hear students even talking with me about it because I joke around with my beginners all the time. Like sometimes we start because we don't put like full rounds in our fundamentals class. We put specifics, situations, but the experience, being stuck in the bottom and all that stuff. So I tell them like, hey, a big plus for the beginning right now is for you to focus on your breathing.
mm,
Like, I know that doesn't feel good, someone being heavy on you, but I tell you what, think about a moment in your life that you panic, you freaked out, and worked out great. And everyone
mm,
started laughing, like, yeah, it usually doesn't work out too well when we get way too emotional and it's just panic.
mm,
So I tell them, like, hey, if for this 2 minutes you couldn't get out of the mount or the side mount, but you're not panicking and you're just defending the mount, keeping your arms in and you're breathing, that's a win. I tell them all the time, that is a win. You didn't panic. You didn't like, no, just breathe, breathe in a position. And little by little, they start to implement it. That's the idea. Always like, how can you implement some of those things in your life? You're having a under pressure situation or have something that uncomfortable and then you feel anxiety, you spike and just like just take a breath, calm down,
mm,
breathe, like analyze this situation. It is what it is. This happened. This is the fact. The fact cannot be changed. Only a response to the fact can be changed. And what we go from here. So that comes with time. And I feel I always tell people how you don't it's a fact that you don't need competition for you to enjoy the benefits of jiu-jitsu. This is a fact, right? um Everything that you do, you're not competing, but you're still in those uncomfortable spots, you still getting better shape, you're still developing your confidence, all that. The the only thing I like to say is that if you want to amplify the power of this personal development tool called jiu-jitsu, one good alternative is um, competing tournaments. Just
mm,
for the fact that the higher stakes, are you still doing jiu-jitsu, still doing everything, but now we put in the mental, the emotional aspect. And it's not even a question, for anyone. And I have, for the listeners, especially the hardcore, been listening for a long time, I have asked this to other people too. And then that's a good question for reflection. Like, if you've been training, whatever, for it could be 10 years, and you just feel like you're you never competed, man, you're gonna be in shape, you're gonna be more confident, all that stuff, we're gonna have more clarity. But if in these 10 years you competed here and there, man, the growth, the mental, the emotional growth are going to be a little higher. You know what I mean? Because you put in yourself in that situation. So nowadays, thing my main 2 cents to students are like, hey, what do you think about competing? I'll tell them I see as a personal development tool, an amplifier that you're still going to be, you don't have to, but if you really want to deal with it, because I found out about a lot of my negative patterns through jiu-jitsu, through competitions. When I started especially doing more mental training, I was like, oh wow, I didn't realize mental blocks that I had. And many times they're the same negative patterns they're reflecting in your personal professional life and show up in different ways. If you're a perfectionist in jiu-jitsu, sure, it's going to show up in your life in other ways, not just in a competition, or you have a fear of disappointing others. That's not just about jiu-jitsu. This is going to reflect in different parts of your life. So you get to learn a lot about yourself when you're in under pressure situations like that, like tournaments. So I love introducing tournaments to people, so can do once, do whatever you want with this experience. You're gonna do it again or not, but just having this one experience just to see like, hey, how is this here? Is this something that I want to do more? Or some people get extremely overwhelmed and they're like, dude, I do not want to do that again. No problem. Some people get inspired by the fear and they get annoyed and they're like, I want to do it again because I want to be able to control myself better. I was like, touche, brother. That's the way to go. Like
Mm.
really address the mental, the emotional aspect. That's where the really growth is. Sure, it's cool to win tournaments. Sure, yeah. But man, every competition is such a unique experience, right? So it's just about preference. People want to do it, but again, we don't need necessarily competition. You're still gonna have a lot of the benefits, and as long as you're mindful, being aware of your feelings of like, okay, I don't want to train today, but why exactly? Are you anxious because you're new? I'm gonna get smashed. I don't know. I have plenty stories. I don't know if you heard too, but maybe the listeners maybe know some people too that yeah, I have plenty that said Gustavo, I sat in the garage in my car and I froze there for 10 minutes. I got back inside and sat on the couch. I couldn't leave the house. I sat in a parking lot for half an hour, couldn't get out of the car, drove back home, you know? So I tell him like like days like these, they're the ones that you should go in. They're the ones that when you leave, you went over the anxiety, be like, oh, that wasn't that bad. Actually, it was really good. I'm glad that I did. So going through there is a quote that I like to say to the in order to enjoy long-term pleasure, you must break through the wall of the short-term pain. Yes, the short-term pain of the anxiety, like I don't know, I don't want to go, I'm not feeling that. If you want to have the long-term pleasure of like, oh man, I feel great that I train, and you're gonna have to break through that wall, and you're gonna have to go there and then kind of push yourself, and then by the time 2 3 minutes in class, you're good to go. That's
Mm.
it. Sometimes the battle is just leaving the house.
Yes, you're spot on, Gustavo. And I also appreciate your point where you're saying about competition because this is something that has played in my mind quite a bit over the past few years. Because when I first started jiu-jitsu, I was competing a fair bit. And I think that you are spot on in terms of the benefits that competition can bring. However, these days I choose not to compete. And sometimes I feel like, oh man, is that just a cop out?
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that I've put through my mind many times. For example, is a decision not to compete just like sitting in the parking lot where you have
Mm-hmm.
too much anxiety that you don't want to step into the mats and you don't want to take that chance, take that risk. You don't want to play the game because something's holding you back. But instead, if you can embrace the opportunity, that's where you're going to learn and grow from. And so, even with this in mind, I feel very comfortable with my decision not to compete because, number one, I honestly feel that the main ingredient for growth through jiu-jitsu is time and effort and energy on the mat. And so there's an extreme of some people who they might only train once or twice a week, but they'll go to a lot of competitions. Or as another extreme, you'll get somebody who is on the mat every single day, 7 days a week, sometimes twice a day. And these are both extremes I'm giving, but I think that the person who may not compete, but that's on the mat training sometimes twice a day, but definitely there every day of the week, because they're spending so much time on the jiu-jitsu mats, experiencing, learning, I feel like their growth will be amazing. They'll probably learn even more than somebody that doesn't spend as much time and effort in the classes as they do, even though that other person competes. So I feel like the benefit of jiu-jitsu is by immersing ourselves as much as we can into the experience of jiu-jitsu. And yes, competition can be a big part of this. Then I also think we need to look and see how our life is. What are the other things we've got going on in our life? And for myself personally, I feel that I love having jiu-jitsu as a place that can be a place of processing, a place of freedom without necessarily a ton of expectation or pressure. Even though you still want to try and win every single role you have, there's still the pressure of trying to perform yourself, right? And there's still that pressure of performance for sure. But then if you have other things in your life that are also very stressful, then not having that stress of a competition around your shoulder also on the back of your mind, I feel like can be the right place for some people to be training and learning and growing through jiu-jitsu from. And so I think that it takes true honesty in yourself and understanding yourself to really choose the level of commitment that you can give into jiu-jitsu to be able to receive the most benefits as well.
Yeah, and it's a good word, the honesty, being honest with yourself. It's a strong word. One of the things I mentioned to you that I'm on final stages of working on my newest book. Yesterday, actually today, I'm reviewing because we're doing the first run of the audiobook. So kind of going over, finding little things, recording a few extra things. Uh, the book, the covers coming along. So there's a lot of stuff, happening. And the
Gustavo, you're teasing all the listeners with this. I can see everybody on the edge of their seats as you speak these words.
no, this is I think people will enjoy, all the topics, all the stuff that people have been listening to my content. Basically, I'm packing everything that I know into that. And the key word of like the golden thread of the book is the word authenticity. And
Mm,
many times we end up not being, because people may have different perceptions about the meaning of the word authenticity. Like, well, I say whatever I want, I dress any way I want, I'm authentic. Sure, it's part of it. But now, are you authentic to your goals and dreams? So you need to be honest. Like, are you be are you not let's talk about tournaments. Are you not participating? Like you said, it's just a cop out, just saying kind of like, yeah, I'm busy, but like, and really in the bottom of your heart, like, I kind of want to, but I'm afraid to fail, and be honest with that. And then meanwhile, the same mindset can appear in a lot of different goals that you may have. Be like, is that the fear of failure? Is that just related to jujitsu? Is that related to opening a business, changing careers? So I talk a lot about that at the beginning, is reflecting on the word authenticity. Like, am I being authentic to myself? Am I being authentic to my goals and dreams? And if not, why? Is that
mm,
anxiety? It was a fear. And that's when we'll talk about learning more about our negative voice, our dark passenger, the voice that really throws all the fear, doubts, insecurities, anxieties that prevent us from being our best selves.
mm,
So this is a practice with the book that goes, of course, it goes way beyond jiu-jitsu. The idea is, sure, the 10 rules to integrate authenticity and performance in jiu-jitsu and beyond. The same rules that you learn I put in jiu-jitsu competition, absolutely you can apply in your personal professional life. And that's what I've been doing for many years, and studying, getting involved in learning personal development, sure. And then I started doing more. And when I started becoming more self-aware of that, I started to really kind of pursue other things, to start noticing, like, let's say you have an idea, like maybe a business idea or a project or whatever. If it doesn't give you any anxiety, doesn't hit you in the chest, nothing, maybe it's not as meaningful you thought it was. Straight up. But when it's like you think about it, and suddenly it's like a shotgun in your chest, like boom, just hit the anxiety, like you're actually in the right track. You're probably up to something good, because it's bringing fears, it's bringing some discomfort, you know. And as the book, The 5 Second Rule by Mel Robbins said, you got about 5 seconds until your negative voice jumps in. You have the first genuine like thought, and we're like, you know what? Yeah, dude, I think I'm gonna go back to school. I'm gonna go to college. And then about 5 seconds, it comes the negative voice, like, dude, You're too old for that. What are you going to do? How are you going to get money to do that? It doesn't even make sense. So now your negative voices start to kind of throw in the 2 cents. So now you're like start getting uncomfortable. The anxiety start to kind of like pile in. And then you're like, you know what? Yeah, I'm not going to college. And then what happened? The pain goes away. So meaning short-term pain goes away. Remember, in order to enjoy long-term pleasure, you must break through the wall of short-term pain. You're gonna
Mm.
have to feel that pain, the anxiety of like discomfort, like, ah, man, the fear of going back to school, getting to a project, and you're gonna have to push it. There's no way that if it's something super meaningful like that, I'm not gonna say no way because some people handle under pressure situations better than others, you know. But I feel that this is something that it's always worth investigating, being curious. Like, hey, why am I not moving forward with this? What is the real reason? My dark passenger is telling me this here, but do you have to agree with your dark passenger? Not really. No, you're not. And I was there's the power of the now. I don't know if you went through this book
Eckhart
before.
Tolle.
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit
Well,
about
you
it.
did.
Maybe,
You were
yeah,
saying that you've
the
listened
new
to it
Earth.
5 times or something on the audiobook.
Yeah, I've been working on the new Earth, again slowly. Like today, I listen to about 10 minutes, and if I feel like start tripping, I stop, I rewind, and I just try to really like um, think about it, and I feel that is great because it just kind of it just brings you back to like, dude, this is the now. We really don't know what's gonna happen or whatever. You get so caught up in some whatever stories that we make up, and he not just him but like of course the author um Eckhart Tolle, he talks about you're not the voice. You're not your negative voice. You're the consciousness who is aware of the negative voice. So you observe the voice. So the first 5 seconds when you're thinking like, yeah, man, I think I want to go back to school, and the next thing, your negative voice, your mental roommate that I like to say, like comes in like, what'd you say? And you don't have
Mm.
to agree with your roommate. They'll be like, wait, dude, you have your opinion. I don't have to agree with it. Easier said than done, but we do need to catch ourselves when it's like, hey, am I buying into the dark passenger propaganda here? Or I'm just, you know, yeah, like really reflecting on is that what I want? So that's my suggestion to people. If you have an idea and hit you in anxiety, investigate it. Investigate it because you might be up to something good. You know what I mean? What do you think about that, dealing with that anxiety?
I think that the explanation and the wisdom that you've just shared, Gustavo, has great strength and is also the common way of seeing things, the popular way. Instead of
Yeah.
common, let's say popular. And I feel like it's really interesting because particularly in this world of social media, where information is shared at rapid rates, popular pieces of wisdom can gain great momentum. And some of these things look really cool. Like, as an example that comes to mind is ice baths, right? There's absolute benefits of ice baths. They're also extremely popular because of how fast and quickly the messaging around ice baths spreads through the communication channels of social media. But ice baths may not be good for everybody, even though they're extremely popular. And so I think that when you speak of this great principle of authenticity, I believe that authenticity carries with it a level of responsibility to be aware. And it also means that you need to authentically have the awareness to make decisions that are authentically in your best interests.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, it is popular to say that if there is fear, embrace and try and step through and overcome that fear. That might not always be the case. And an example where this hit home really clearly for me is a little while ago, I didn't have a car. All I had was a push bike, a bicycle. I was getting everyone the bicycle. And for me, the bicycle was like a pair of legs in terms of how comfortable I was on the bicycle. And one particular Sunday evening, I went to do a gym workout at the University of Queensland here in Australia. And this University of Queensland had an amazing gym. That's where I was going. And to get to the gym, you had to go up this massive staircase. There was a ramp and there was a really big staircase. And I would always ride my bike up the ramp to get to the top of the staircase. The staircase was probably almost the size of a one-story house. Yeah, so it was a big staircase. This particular day, I thought, do you know what? I'm scared. I'm fearful to just jump off this staircase instead of going down the ramp, just take my bike down the staircase. Because I'm not a stunt rider or anything like this. I wasn't a stunt rider. I was just using my bike for commuting. And I sat at the top of that staircase on my bike looking down, feeling, man, I'm scared. I've got great fear going down this staircase, but I need to embrace my fear. I need to overcome this fear and go down this staircase. And I sat at the top of that staircase for, I think, probably 15, 20 minutes, trying to get the courage to take my push bike down. And then what I did after that 20 minutes, put my head down, looked at the ground as I rode and went down the ramp, riding home. And I felt like such a loser. Man, why didn't I just overcome that fear and go down the staircase on this bike? And I was feeling like a massive loser because there was 20 minutes I was trying to say, come on, Matt, come on, Matt. I couldn't do it. And it was only until that next day that that light sparkled for me saying, do you know what? It's probably a good thing that I listened to that fear because there's probably a very, very good chance that I could have broken a bone, severely hurt myself.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I believe that the authenticity and responsibility of authenticity is also about understanding which of those fears you really need to be listening to and which of those fears are just pretend monsters that need to be overcome. And I feel like life can teach us this. And I also feel that this is something where, for example, jiu-jitsu can teach us. So, for example, what's a pretend fear on the jiu-jitsu mat? Well, a pretend fear on the jiu-jitsu mat could be just say you've got this, you've got an amazing athlete who's 10 years younger, 20 kilos heavier, strong as a ape, as big as an ox, and a belt lower than you saying at training, hey, let's have a roll. Let's have a roll. And you know he's going to go guns a-blazing, trying to beat you, he wants to try and beat that upper rank. Well, if you weren't in the right place, you might feel fearful, egotistically fearful. Oh, I don't want to lose to this lower ranked person. And I've heard of situations like this where people in jiu-jitsu might even refuse to train with that particular person. That kind of fear, if it's just about not wanting to lose, could be seen as an empty fear that we can authentically go through that experience because A, you might not lose. B, who really minds if you lose or not because it's about the learning and growth that's going to take place. You might make a friend through this. You might learn something from this particular person.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of a fear is a pretend fear that I believe that we do need to embrace and overcome and be authentic to ourselves. And I believe that a sign of that pretend fear is the fact that our ego is so heavily invested. But what if this particular person also had a reputation for not caring for their training partners, had broken the last 5 people's legs that they've trained with?
Mm-hmm.
Do you really want to be the 6th? You might be fearful of being the 6th, but in that place where it's not that ego fear, but it's that genuine self-preservation place of fear, then perhaps that fear is worth listening to. And so just like it was in that situation at the top of the staircase at the University of Queensland, or that fear helping us make the decision not to train with this person who's as big as an ape who breaks people's legs. We need to understand that there is a place of authentic fear and to be able to listen to that as well. And so I believe that it's a responsibility to be able to distinguish between those genuine fears and the pretend fears, let's call them. And I
Hmm.
feel like a big indication as to whether or not it's a fear that we need to be overcoming is whether it's our ego that's placing that fear. Because then through humility, we can pass through that place of ego and grow.
Absolutely. And they always talk about how you have the psychological fear and have the real fear. Like you said, like that actually your life or your health could be in danger. Absolutely. They say, and I've heard a bunch of times, but they say that baby, like a child is born with only two types of fear: fear of loud noises and fear of falling. I don't know, but that's what I've heard that, like a bunch of times. And everything else basically is just a lot of psychological, the fears that we put on ourselves. But for sure, you're 100% correct with that. With it was even me, like when I was younger in Brazil, I used to like to get involved with some surfing and bodyboarding and stuff like that. And there's times the ocean is big, and then people are like, ah, man, don't be a wimp. Yeah, let's go. I'm like, dude, one thing that my mom always mentioned to me is not to be scared or afraid of the ocean, but the word is respect the ocean.
Mm.
So much bigger than you. You know what I mean? Then, if you go into big waves, you better be so sure what you're doing because you can die, literally. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
it's not just about I'm afraid to go in because the waves are big. Like, absolutely, people die with big waves. Fact. So for sure, you're talking about the authenticity and kind of knowing when is your ego like screaming, for you not to do it, and when it's not. Rolling to that, I want to get into the to your podcast basically. So it'll be two things: what are your motivation to start your podcast, but I want to go back when you started. How was the mindset? Because I tell you what, how many people who are listening to us right now would be like, yeah, I want to do a podcast, I want to create a podcast, but they are not because of like psychological fears of judgment. Am I good enough? Who am I to run a podcast? So most people that I know, not everyone, but when you think about when you have an idea like that, man, there's a real good chance your dark passenger is gonna jump in and be like, dude, who are you to like actually do a podcast? Come on, who's gonna listen to you or whatever? And you have to be able to catch it like right away, like just cut it and then just move on with your goal. Did you have internal battles about starting yours?
Absolutely, Gustavo. I think that there's and even egotistical internal battles because I was thinking back then, I'm already doing well in the legion. Why I don't need to embark on the podcast journey. So there was some thoughts like this because I was thinking like, is it even necessary to start something new?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think sometimes when you've already done well and are doing well in a particular area, to put on that beginner cap
Mm-hmm.
and be prepared to go through that school of hard knocks from the ground up, that can be a very humbling experience that I think can also teach us a lot of valuable lessons. And even after having been doing Rolling Through Negotiations podcast for just over a year now, there's a ton of things that I still need to learn. And every single episode I re-listen to and learn from, and because there is so much to learn, and it's such a challenging, competitive environment, the podcasting world. But the gifts that we learn are incredible. And I feel like in some ways, podcasting can be similar to where you were speaking about the jiu-jitsu competition. See, we think when we go to jiu-jitsu competition that we want to get that gold medal. And in truth, yeah, it's beautiful to win that gold medal. But like you've been saying, the lessons along the way that you learn and the amplification of all the beautiful jiu-jitsu gifts that competing brings, as you've been speaking about, Gustavo, they're the true benefits of going into the competition. And I feel like even though in podcasting, for example, I'd love to see Rolling Through Negotiations podcast, the number one podcast worldwide, the number one podcast, but when it comes to negotiations in particular, maybe a little bit more realistic goal worldwide, right?
Mm-hmm.
And recently there was, I think it was on Buzzsprout, or there was a ranking where we came up as one of the most popular negotiation podcasts, which was amazing.
Cool.
I'd love to see that happening more and more. With this in mind, though, it's the journey and growth that being involved in a podcast brings that I believe is the most rewarding part of the journey. So, for example, even things like I was listening to a podcast the other day and I realized, man, I need to be able to speak more articulate, pronounce, really use my tongue and my mouth better to speak incredibly clearly. And I feel like communication is such a detailed craft that almost all of us can improve communication in one way or another, whether it be getting better at storytelling, using tone of voice better, captivating audience, a ton of different ways in which we can get better at communicating. And podcasting is a brilliant opportunity to allow us to become better in communication. And I think that a clear example of this is that there's a reason why we have two ears and one mouth, because I believe that listening is at least twice as important as speaking. And to be a great podcast host, I'm sure you can attest to this one, Gustavo, you really need to listen closely to what the guest is saying. And there's been times in podcast episodes where I haven't listened as closely as I would have liked. And so I've missed some golden pieces of information that listeners would have loved to have heard more about, but I didn't ask the question because I wasn't listening close enough at the time. And so these are just examples of the gifts and benefits that podcasting can really bring. And so if you do have a listener there that's wondering, oh man, do I start my podcast? I believe the answer is yes, because of the overcoming any sort of negative blocks, and overcoming any fear that we're speaking about. Also, the journey, the experience, and the way that it helps to make you better as a communicator in whatever you're doing.
So interesting. We're talking about like the importance of communicating or like speaking, improving the speaking capabilities, enunciation, and stuff like that. Because last month, I know that some people might be listening this for the first time. You know, people who listen to your podcast, and then you're going to be promoting like, hey y'all, I've been in this podcast here, Gustavo, and people don't know Gustavo or know what it's about. You know, so I've been through the process of my book right now and everything, and I'm doing the audiobook for the first time. So as soon as I thought, I always wanted to do an audiobook because I do enjoy having my own, you know, like, or not having my own, but like listening to podcasts. To book, I prefer listening than reading. And so like, so I know that a lot of people could benefit from this too. So I said like, nah, you know, I do podcasts, so it should be fine. So I totally underestimated the task. English
Mhm.
being my second language. If yours in Portuguese, probably still be tough, but sure, not as tough. But in English, it has been some type of like, how could I say, immersion of like improving my English, because I have in one of my students, Chris, he comes here and then we record it, and he was the director as well, to be like, hey, let's do this one again. Hey, let's repeat this. And for some, you know, some words are like tongue twisters for me that can be tough. Maybe some people are listening like, "Oh, you have pretty good English." Yeah, I'm aware that I have pretty decent English, but it's not perfect. It's not my native
Mm.
language. So, and it can be very frustrating. Then I'm repeating the same stupid word and it still doesn't sound right. So now I'll start getting frustrated.
Mm.
But I felt that as I'm listening again, and then my wife was like, "Wow, we're enunciating the words better," like because because I have to, and have someone saying, like, "Hey, say this here." Say so. Now I'm a little more conscious of, okay, I need to speak a little better. I need to improve that. So for sure, massive challenge that when I started, I was like, "Oh boy, this is going to be a lot more complicated." But man, I grew a
Mm.
lot. I felt like I have a small upgrade on the quality of my English. Let's put this way, just from I've done stuff before related to that or public speaking to improve and deliver a message better, and I haven't done in a while. So this has been definitely I noticed that a good improvement to help. It's not going to be perfect, but it's help to clean up my English, a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that that can also go into that place of authenticity, Gustavo, because I have I'm lucky enough to have quite a few Brazilian friends, and my wife is Brazilian, and I've seen a lot of Brazilian people when they move here to Australia, and I'm sure it's the same over there when Brazilian people move over to the US. There can be that inferiority thinking of, oh man, they're not going to listen to me because of my
Hmm.
pronunciation. I've got this accent, and there can be this, way of holding yourself back, right? And I believe that accents are beautiful things. To speak with an accent is an amazing opportunity to express who you are. And so I think that as long as people can understand what you're saying, if you are from another country and you do have an accent, you can use that as a great gift, as an advantage, rather than as being a setback.
Hmm.
Because with your accent, it sets you apart from a lot of other people. So it gives you that that light. You shine out. You shine, so people will notice this. And then if you're authentic in speaking with your accent and you can still pronounce the words enough, just enough for people to understand what the word is that you're trying to say, it will force people to listen closer. And it just shows a lot about who you are. And I see some people with Brazilian accents trying to speak or speaking English with a Brazilian accent, and they do often get held back through this. But then there's examples like yourself, Gustavo, doing an audio book, which is amazing with your podcast as well. We're all in English. It's fantastic. I also have a friend. His name is Daniel Hine. I'm sure he'll be happy with me mentioning his name. He won't have a problem with it anyway. But he does a lot of big time sales and presentations and educational presentations in the tech industry, presenting high tech knowledge and data-based information amongst experts. And he too has a Brazilian accent. So I think that if you can embrace accents as well as other things in our life with a place of understanding, yeah, you're not perfect, but you're going to be authentic in your approach. You're going to do the best that you can. You're going to give it a red hot go, but embracing that opportunity through authenticity and not letting a part of who you are holding you back can be a really good way of being able to serve others and also reach your own potential.
Yeah, I felt that when I started studying English, well, when I moved to the US, I really my motivation, it was, man, if I want to live in a country, I want to sound, the best that I can sound, of like educated, and again, it's not going to be perfect, but I am trying like my best to like clean up as much. I don't think about my accent per se, because depending sometimes what words I'm using, and I just got in a conversation with someone, maybe someone can say like, "Oh wow, didn't even realize that you're from Brazil, you're not from the U.S." Depending, because sometimes all it takes is one word with a little kind of accent, like, "Ah, got a little accent there." So
Mm.
sometimes you see that from someone that speaks very well, but got one little word. They're like, oh, okay, got a little accent there, and then you can sometimes even catch where people were from just because of that. So depend what words I'm using. Sometimes I get people like, oh man, someone who said like, oh dude, you sound like you're from Jersey or something, New Jersey. And I was like, it's just funny. But of course, I'm always going to be trying, doing my best. In everything that I get involved, I want to do well. I don't want to do mediocrity. I've been studying Spanish now for year and a half. I always wanted to do so. I do just use app, every day. Every day depends. Sometimes could be just 5 minutes. Sometimes could be 45 minutes. Depend on how much time I have. But every day I do some, and I
Yeah.
do have a class like with a teacher once a week. Sometimes just conversation. It's just something that I always wanted to do, and it's people assume that I speak Portuguese, it's easy. Man, no, it ain't like that. I understand, and I was Latin, sure, a lot of similarities, but it's a different language, and
Yeah.
it's frustrating, man. It's frustrating learning another language, So
Yeah.
I'm improving, but again, at the stages of learning, right, that we talked about earlier. You know, Before I just didn't know. And now I'm just in the third stage of being conscious and competent, raising my level of competency. I'm not in the fourth stage yet of unconscious and competent. That comes when you like, especially when a different language, you start dreaming about, the other language. You start to actually speak in a different language. I felt that I was when I started to kind of get a momentum on English, so caught myself, dreaming in another language. So I felt like it was becoming more natural.
Yeah. And this is where sometimes if you know a language or a skill that is close to another skill, sometimes it can make it more difficult to
Sure.
perfect.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you were to take somebody who'd never spoken Spanish or Portuguese and they were to learn Spanish, beginning with that clean slate would also bring an advantage in that they wouldn't have a similar language to potentially get confused by. And so the nuances and differences that you need to speak when you already have a similar, the nuances and um, level of detail that you need to bring when you already have a similar skill or already speak a similar language like Portuguese and Spanish, I think that would take a different and perhaps uniquely specific set of challenges to be able to then master Spanish, as opposed to if you'd never spoken any similar language at
That's
all.
true.
It's kind of like when I think about with jiu-jitsu, for example, if you've been doing a particular technique that's almost correct, but not quite correct for a very long time, sometimes it could be more difficult for you to change that bad habit into the perfect technique. It might take you a little longer if you've already formed your own way of doing something, even though it's not strictly right, as opposed to, say, beginner white belt seeing the technique for the very first time,
Hmm.
because they don't have any other patterns to be falling back into. So, yeah, this is an example of using what we've got to our best advantage possible and continuously learning in this journey. So it's amazing that you're learning, Spanish, Gustavo.
Yeah.
I think that something that happened from jiu-jitsu early this week that I think would be interesting for your listeners to hear about is I was going through a negotiation process. And one of the reasons actually why I created and we produced the Rolling Through Negotiations podcast is because, when we're about to do a jiu-jitsu training spar with our teammates, we call it a roll, right? And so the podcast brings principles of BJJ as well as the principles from my just over 20 years as being a lawyer into the negotiation space to give our listeners strategies and tactics to negotiate better and to negotiate their lives better as well. Because the first and foremost negotiation we have every single day is that with ourselves, negotiating the right behaviors, the right habits, the right things to be doing, even getting out of bed in the morning when that alarm goes off. It's a negotiation to press
Mhm.
stop on the alarm and get out of the bed. That's our very first negotiation every day. But we're
So
continuously
let me ask
negotiating.
you. Sorry, cutting you, but it's kind of like going along with what you're speaking. When we talk about negotiations, like we talk about a little bit about the word authenticity. So when you talk about negotiation, what is a word that stands out for you that you
Yes,
connect negotiations with?
yes. So our word, and it's even similar to authenticity, is integrity.
Hmm.
And so this is an example of even where jiu-jitsu helped in the negotiation context because there was a negotiation that was taking place, and the other party to the negotiation was not being clear in terms of their process, in terms of the information they had, what they were looking to achieve. All they were really trying to do was to gather more information to use to their advantage, and so that they could then control the negotiation process for the benefit and sole interest of their client. And so when it comes to negotiations, you're very much on the back foot if you don't have the information that you need. And so it's similar to jiu-jitsu in this way, because if you don't have the information of a particular jiu-jitsu technique, for example, or you're in a jiu-jitsu match and the person that you're up against is controlling the jiu-jitsu process, has all the techniques and all the information for that particular process of their systemized jiu-jitsu technique, and you're playing their game, you're very much on the back foot. And so in that particular negotiation, something that I did was I explained what I would be doing in a way of trying to get the control and input and impact and change the direction of the negotiation process without giving all of the information that the other person in this negotiation was looking for. And so this happened in a particular phone call. And then after that phone call, I got off the phone and I really questioned myself, gee, by not giving all the information, did I act with a lack of integrity?
Mm.
And I deeply contemplated this particular point because I can see on the one hand that if you're coming from a place of transparency, you're going to put all the information, all the cards out on the table. But what about integrity? Does integrity mean that you need to give every single part of the game away? And what I did in that moment is I looked into jiu-jitsu and started thinking about, well, if you have two high-level competitors in jiu-jitsu and one competitor is controlling the process, has all the information and techniques for this particular game that's being played. For example, the game might be leg locks, and this person might be an absolute leg lock master, and you don't know much about leg locks, but you're going down this rabbit hole. You're in that 50-50 position, for example. Do you need to give all your information away, or can you set a trap that allows you a way out of there to move the jiu-jitsu match into the direction that you're strong at? And so I thought about this and I thought, well, you know what? It's very, very common in jiu-jitsu. It's one of the fundamental parts of jiu-jitsu where you change angles, you change directions, you set one particular movement, but really you want the opposite direction and you're trying to get the counter response to that initial movement to go the other way. And sometimes in high stakes BJJ matches, you absolutely need to do that big time. And you're not going to tell the opposing athlete what your next move is going to be. And so, yeah, that's an example of where I looked at BJJ and that principle of integrity to really question myself and find the answer as to whether or not I acted with integrity in that spirit of that particular negotiation. And the answer that I got to was generally, if all things considered, you can give all the information and everybody's been completely transparent, giving all the information to each other. Okay, that's one way. That might be like a training session of BJJ in some scenarios. But in other scenarios where there are high stakes, where you're definitely on the back foot, where the other person does have everything in their way, then not giving all the information away at that very point in time can be a very strategic and intelligent way to get the direction that you need to be going in. So that's an example of where
I like it.
jiu-jitsu techniques helped in the negotiation context
I
and
like it.
also helped me find the answer on integrity because I think that being a person of integrity is very important.
I don't want to like that. So let's talk about habits. What did you say is one habit that you have that has helped you progress? Doesn't matter if it's jujitsu journey in your life or something that you still do consistently besides, of course, or training jiu-jitsu or whatever, but it could be from breathing to reading to whatever, a habit that I feel that stands out for you.
Yeah, one that comes to mind, Gustavo, is reading the Bible. I think that there's such intrinsic wisdom within the words of the Bible. And the way that I read the Bible is every morning I'll sit in this particular chair in my bedroom and I'm reading the Bible from the beginning of the Bible all the way through, just in chronological order. There's a lot of reading plans and study plans for the Bible, but I'm just reading it as if it was a book, right? And I read one paragraph per day out loud 3 times. And as I'm doing this, I really reflect on those words, and it's incredible the way that reading the Bible helps shape our lives, and definitely I can say shapes my life into positive directions, just energetically, without consciously understanding the positive impact that reading the Bible like this brings. But it's just an incredible piece of wisdom that is so positively impactful into my life. So that's a daily habit that is
Beautiful.
great. But I think that our lives and our days to be successful in what we're doing need to be designed in a way where we have a multitude of habits that are
Hmm.
good for us and good for those around us, and that we're doing these things each day.
That is right. Also, what is when you think about pieces of advice along your way, what is a piece of advice that stands out that someone gave to you? Sometimes could it be even growing up, parents, family, or whatever. Sometimes could it be jujitsu, sometimes could it be business, but anything that comes to your mind?
There's two that come to mind, Gustavo. So I'll
Hmm.
share. I'll share. Should I give them both?
Sure. Why not?
All right. One that comes to mind is by a mentor who was at the very top of the top in terms of being in Australia here. We have two different types of lawyers. We have those that typically go by the name of being a solicitor, and we have those that are called barristers. And barristers are the ones that go into the courtroom, and the solicitor will help the barrister in that courtroom process. Unlike in the United States, where you have the lawyers. You don't have barristers in the United States. You have just the same person, I think, goes to the courtroom that does all the sort of behind the scenes work as well. Whereas in Australia, it's a little bit different. This particular woman was at the top of the top. She was winning every single case in terms of courtroom work. And she was a great mentor of mine. She retired a couple of years ago. But the amongst the great wisdom she taught me, one of the pieces of wisdom was that less is more. And this came about because we're in some pretty high stakes litigation matters involving massive international corporations. And we were representing a lady that had an ill son who was a woman of integrity, but was a small business owner, nothing like these massive corporate giants. And the lawyers of these massive corporate giants were continuously writing overly lengthy, multiple page letters. And in litigation, sometimes writing letters can almost be like, the jab or the change of direction in jiu-jitsu, or the jab of boxing, for example. They can set things up. And the word of wisdom was less is more. So we'll be responding to, 10, 12 page letters with maybe two or even one page letters. But what we said was specific, to the point,
Mm-hmm.
direct, without any nonsense. And so I believe that this is almost goes like to what Bruce Lee said: fear the man, not that knows 1,000 techniques, but fear the man that's practiced one technique, 10,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
If we can do that one thing in such a powerful, impactful way, less is really more. So that's one piece of advice.
Nice.
And another one came from a kickboxing coach, because I did some kickboxing earlier in the martial arts journey. And this particular coach, he fought in K1 and was a really good professional kickboxer. And we're there training, and he said, the saying that practice makes perfect? Well, it's wrong. You guys need to be paying more attention to what you're doing, because it's perfect practice that makes perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So they're two amazing pieces of advice that I feel can really help us as we go about our days.
Yeah, and it's very true though. If you practice your armbar 100 times, but it's wrong, it ain't gonna help you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. I know you mentioned the Bible, but what is a book that comes to your mind that made a big impact on you at a certain moment of your life? You can choose personal development, you can choose business, one of each. It's just like at that specific moment. Because sometimes you know how it is. You have a book that, man, you may not remember most of the part of the content, but one page made such an impact that you never forgot that page. And yeah, it made an impact in your life. So, what is a book that comes to your mind?
I think that there's so many great books,
Mm-hmm.
Gustavo, and it's difficult to answer this question because there are so many fantastic books. And I think that all the books we read do have positive impacts on our lives.
Mm-hmm.
One that comes to mind is The Alchemist by your
Mm-hmm.
fellow Brazilian, Paulo Coelho.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that that book was fantastic for me at the time, because I did read it a long time ago, at a time when I was really trying to find what is my purpose in life? What is my quest? What is my journey? What is my purpose? Why am I here?
Mm.
And I feel that a lot of people get lost trying to find this answer. And The Alchemist is very much about trying to find the answer. What is really interesting, what was really interesting for me, is when I read the book, I didn't feel like there was a very, very completely crystal clear answer to this question.
Mm-hmm.
But what I realized is, as we pursue whatever it is that we're doing in our life and we pursue it wholeheartedly, our purpose will appear.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Makes sense.
Hmm.
Very nice. So getting close to the end, and I have a question here that is, let's go back to when you start, you're practicing law and all this stuff. So if you have to go back and have a conversation with your younger version when you kind of getting into starting your journey in law, what piece of advice would you give to your younger version?
That's an interesting question, Gustavo, because
So many things too, though.
there's so
Like
many
plays a
things.
movie, in your mind.
Yes. And I'm thinking about, for example, I heard, I think it might have been Matthew McConaughey
Mm-hmm.
speak recently saying that as he was motivating himself throughout his career, who he'd be looking up to was that version of himself in 10 years' time or 20 years' time. And I also believe that the question and guidance and thinking about, hey, what would we tell our younger self to help them in their journey is a very wise question that a lot of great thinkers come to contemplating, right? But there's also the part of this question that I think sometimes gets forgotten, which is maybe we only know now what we know because of what our younger self didn't know then.
Oh, 100%.
And so there, of course, as we get more experience in life and we learn much more in whatever it is that we're doing, perhaps we had to not know things back then to be able to arrive where we are now. And so to answer your question, and the first thought that came into my mind when you asked this great question, Gustavo, I was thinking, you know what? The answer would be telling my younger self to not feel the need to become something in order to be loved, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to be overly successful to be loved, right? Because I remember even when I was studying to become a lawyer, for example, I had these visions of, oh, one day I can work in these massively great, fantastic offices, being a top lawyer with a lot of wealth and respect all around me, and be able to have all this influence and affluence everywhere. And that was a big part of the drive. But that was also based on lack and feelings of inadequacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we need to be careful of this because we need to feel like we're missing something in order to reach for something new. If we feel completely fulfilled in every way, then that can take away motivation for us to improve and grow. And so this part of that shadow or this part of that fear can authentically motivate us to serve others around us better and to grow into a better version of ourselves. And so these feelings of inadequacy or non love or without having that complete love for ourselves, which is often what it comes down to in terms of really trying to succeed and fear of failure and these kinds of things, as difficult as those emotions and feelings may be, they can serve us greatly. And so I feel like the younger version of myself did the best that they could. And I feel like if we're completely honest, if your listeners completely honest, they can probably say hand on heart, yes, there might have been some things that would have been done better in hindsight. And what they know now, if they had said that or could have the opportunity of speaking to the younger self and steering them in a different direction, there might be wisdom that they know now that they didn't know then.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe we had to go through those processes and we had to go
100%.
through that journey, not knowing certain things to become the best version of ourselves.
Absolutely. Even when I think about my jiu-jitsu journey or where I'm at today, everything I do in my life is around jiu-jitsu or things that I've been able to do for the past like 15 years with the jiu-jitsu mental coaching, sharing content. The only way is, for example, when I think about what I could tell my younger self, as far as let's say jiu-jitsu related, it would be like, dude, don't focus so much on the outcome. Am I going to win? Am I going to lose? Is it going to work? Is it not going to work out? And more into the journey itself and improving, getting better. The result will basically be just a consequence of all the work that you're doing. And I was heavily focused on the extrinsic motivation to be able to, the rewards, the perks of accomplishing something, like you said, that could be a title, it could be some type of like physical thing, if it's a nice car or a nice clothes or whatever, you know what I mean, or having that outcome or not so much, you know. And when I look back, if I didn't go through all I did, yeah, there would be no WGJ mental coach, because the reason why I relate with people is just because I struggle a lot with anxiety performance, and I got sick of it. And I was like, you know what, I need to understand myself better. And if I
Mm.
was, you know, winning everything, I barely had losses, and yay, I'm a big champion. And absolutely, I would not resonate, because I know athletes in jiu-jitsu fighting, they're like very different, a different tier of, you know, of how they're wired. Some of the best athletes in the world in jiu-jitsu, MMA, that for them it's almost like tough to resonate sometimes. Let's say a student said like, oh, I got nervous and I couldn't deliver, you know, and they almost look confused, like, but what do you mean, but nervous for what? Because in their mind it'd be like, why are you nervous? You know,
Yes.
like it cannot have been processed. Like it doesn't make any sense. But for most of the humans, you know, like normal humans like us, I'd say that wish I was wired that way, to a point that it like, man, so easy to deal with an under pressure situation. You know, it would be nice. But I feel that just, you know, going through that, that's my connection in a way for people sometimes. One of the best feedbacks that sometimes you can get from people is when you really can get to someone's heart or mind or whatever, and they say like, dude, I felt like you're speaking directly to me, you
Yes.
know. And many of the times the only way I can do that is because like I've been there before. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like I felt that before. I felt the frustration before of not being my authentic self, because fear was preventing me from being my best self. And jiu-jitsu, whatever, you know. And it's like you just climbing this mountain, and you have a backpack full of unnecessary rocks and weights, and then you're going up, and saying like, dude, do you really need to have some of the extra weight? You can open up the backpack and start kind of unloading some of the stuff, unnecessary baggage that you're carrying, you know. So yeah, the climb always going to be tough, but you making a lot tougher putting unnecessary stuff in that backpack, you know. So and that work never really ends, man. We always dealing with that, catching ourselves, you know, for when you least realize, we're just doing that with a backpack carrying, like, dude, I'm tripping, you know. There's no reason why I should have did this, boom, and then move on. But when we're not present and we're not conscious of it, that's when we go like zombies, you know what I mean? We just
Yeah.
act just like listening to the whatever the dark passenger is saying. It's like, wow, it must be true, it's in my head, it must be true. And we don't kind of question the validity of the thought. You just kind of go with it, you know. So yeah, dude. When we look back, you know, plays a movie saying like, everyone say like, man, I wish I knew what I know now, you know, when it's younger. But like you said, we all doing the best we can with the tools and knowledge we have right now. Maybe next week we'll have more, but right now that's all we got, man. And back then it was the same thing. When you even less, especially emotional maturity levels, because I like to say it's not just, um, are you mature, you know, like, we always, I was talking with a friend of mine yesterday saying like, man, we always think that we are mature. We're 15, we're mature. 25, we're mature. We're 35, we're always mature. But are we emotionally mature, you know? So the emotional maturity, I feel that is a level from 0 to 100. I don't think we're ever going to be to 100, unless we're like a monk or something. But chances are we're not going to reach the 100. But we're trying to push that number up. And when we're younger, our number is very low. When we blow
Mm.
up with no stupid reason, we have our pity party or whatever. And with time, we start to look back and be like, dude, what I was thinking. Oh my God. You have an experience, change the belief, boom, that's something else. You upgraded your emotional maturity. And it's a process that as long as we're here in this world, our job is to raise that level. And we're gonna make good choices, not so good choices. And as long as you learn from the not so good choices and be like, okay, keep strengthening our emotional maturity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, dude, great to have you here, man. Awesome that we're able to catch up not too long after the our conversation, and for sure, I'm gonna have to go there for a part two whenever you want because there's so many angles, so many things that we can talk more about it. And but yeah, just to wrap up, just say anything you want about the podcast or your business, any plug that you want to give. It's open. Go ahead.
I just think that I don't really want to give a plug, Gustavo. I think that I've already mentioned Rolling Through Negotiations podcast, and I appreciate connecting with you, Gustavo. And likewise, if you ever want to do a part two on BJJ mental coach, I'm here for you as well. What I'd like to say in terms of the parting words is for your listeners to keep on learning, keep on growing, being authentic, and using jiu-jitsu as the powerful resource that it is to become the best version of yourself.
That is it. Thank you so much, Matt. And for all the listeners, I've been trying to do I'm just doing too many things at the same time, competing, uh, watching my weight, doing a bunch of projects at the same time. Sometimes people ask me, like, hey, is there another episode? I'm like, dude, I need some more help, you know what I mean, to be able to release some more stuff. But when I have a chance, I put it out there, and it's always good because I'm always learning too, you know what I mean? So it's always for me it's fun to do this. I just turn the computer on and then boom, okay, we just recorded the conversation. And for we have some of my hardcore listeners who have listened to all the episodes, which is awesome. And so big shout out to all the loyal listeners. And that's it, y'all. See you guys soon. Thank you so much, Matt. Ooze.